Hi, I'm Mckinster, and today our group wants to talk to you about the cost of advertising. Now, accepting misinformation in advertising is having profound effects on consumers in American society. Profits have driven companies to use increasingly more undermined techniques to control consumers' purchasing decisions. There are many complex factors that citizens need to be aware of to fully understand the methods that these companies and businesses are using to control our purchasing. The effects of unquestioning consumption will weaken our society as a whole if we don't start a change now. So to begin, we need to really look at a brief view of advertising. Now, for those of you who don't know, advertising's been around since the beginning of the marketplace, but for our purposes, we're going to look at American advertising. And it starts with a notable historic figure, Benjamin Franklin. Now, in the late 1700s, Benjamin Franklin introduced advertising into the newspaper, which was revolutionary for the time. Now, these ads were often local. They were a service that people didn't know about, and the same advertisements appeared week after week. And they were full of the information a consumer needed to make an informed purchasing decision. And this is what's truly essential in the advertising business relationship with the consumer. Now, businesses today, with the advent of radio, television, the internet, social platforms, and mobile marketing, have overwhelming influence over our purchasing decisions. Some of these multi-billion and trillion-dollar industries leverage their resources to implement lobbying techniques and control the marketplaces that we find ourselves in. So the federal government foresaw the potential of a disaster when it comes to advertising as a form of business communication with citizens. So in 1914, the FTC was created, Federal Trade Commission, and according to the website, their goal is to protect consumers against any advertising they hear anywhere. Now, it might seem like the problem is solved, but if we look at the proposed budget for 2018 for the FTC, it's roughly $306 million, which is less than $1 per person. If we compare this to the $152 billion that the top 50 companies in the U.S. are spending alone on advertising, we should understand immediately that it's up to us to protect ourselves, and we cannot depend on our government to protect us from ill-advised advertising. Now, I'd like to introduce my colleague Jake to touch on the techniques and the psychology of advertising. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Now, with how competitive the marketplace is, every company is looking for whatever advantage they can get to make that consumer pick their product on the shelf of hundreds. And this is where design psychology and effective advertisement is going to come into play. And this takes two different levels. The first level is the actual layout and the design of the ad, the logo, the brand, the product package. And people subconsciously pick up a lot just from the color. And color is a big factor because it's going to provide a guideline to whatever emotion that the advertiser or the designer wants to convey to the consumer. And these emotions can range from anger, excitement, optimism, any type of health and wellness focus. In the first level, it doesn't necessarily misinform the consumer. It does, however, subtly manipulate their feelings and how they approach that product. And now the second level is content. This is where advertisers can really manipulate misinformation. Let's take buzzwords into account. With any trip to the supermarket, you're going to be bombarded with a plethora of different buzzwords that range from natural, low-fat, healthy, no added sugar. And a lot of these words don't have any legal regulations. And most people don't know that. They think if it says natural, that means it is natural, but there's no real definition for what natural is. the issue is that these consumers are building their assumptions off of those buzzwords. And the real dangerous part of that is assumptions. Let's take the buzzword cage-free. We are seeing this more and more as people nowadays start to shape their purchases into more ethical purchases. They try to value their ethics, and they in turn buy products that go in line with those. So you see, so they go to the supermarket, they see cage-free, and they think to themselves, that's great. I want my chickens to live a healthy life. I want to support that industry in that direction it's going in. But in reality, a lot of the companies that put cage-free on them just simply take their chickens out of the cage and they just kind of corral them all into a very enclosed, low-lit warehouse. And a warehouse is objectively not a cage. So they're not lying to anybody. They're not exactly telling you the whole truth. And they're not going to, since they're not lying, they're not going to open themselves up to any lawsuit. But what is happening is, since the consumer is going off of their assumption, they're kind of lying for the advertiser. They assume that if it's not one thing, it's the other. You know, if it's not slow, that means it's fast. And this leads into impulse buying and how advertisers tend to highlight what's either really good or what's either really bad about their product. And they're banking on that consumers aren't going to go out and do their research. They're not going to uncover what is a regulation and what isn't, because, as everybody knows, ain't nobody got time for that. And now I'm going to pass it off to Ashley.
Thank you, Jake. So touching on his psychology of advertising, I think it's important to know the difference between the psychology of wants and needs. So wants tend to be a little bit more psychologically based, and then they kind of have to do with like esteem and social circles. Needs tend to be more physiological, things that a person actually needs to survive and continue on with their life. So goods and services are made to fulfill these consumers' wants and needs. And to really understand this, we need to focus on American psychologist Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So this chart is going to be representation from psychology contemporary perspectives. Basically, you can see that there's three different groups here. The basic needs group includes safety needs and physiological needs. This has to do, again, with food, water, a safe place to sleep at night. Next up is the psychological needs. This has to do with self-esteem and belongingness and love. This is going to have to do with somebody's career, friend circle, romantic relationships. And then the final top of the pyramid is the self-fulfillment needs. This is self-actualization. This has to do a lot with finding one's purpose in life, spirituality, creativity. So because of this, we can see that most Americans do fall into the psychological needs category. This means that they're willing to spend tons of money on ways to advance them in their career, in their romantic relationships, and in their social circles. So a great example of how a company can turn somebody's wants or needs for their insecurities into needs is Listerine. They released an ad campaign in 1928, which turned common bad breath into a chronic disease called halitosis. So as you can see in these ads, halitosis can make you unpopular, and it can even lead to making you get divorced. So by turning a common small issue like bad breath into something so unavoidable and chronic, such as halitosis, you can see how consumers would be willing to spend so much money to avoid this. In fact, they were able to turn their sales from just $115,000 into $8 million in only 7 years. So as you can see, by exploiting insecurities, companies have found that they can make exponentially more sales by targeting their consumers. This is why it's so important to understand the difference between wants and needs when you're looking at something to purchase. At this point, I'm going to pass it off to Ryan.
Thank you, Ashley. So now we're going to turn it around a bit and talk about the benefits of making an informed decisions. Specifically on a personal level. Informed decisions, when making a purchase, are beneficial to both the customer and their community around them, although the abundance of choices and variety on the market can make this somewhat difficult. The internet is an excellent tool for product and company research. Both info from that company, maybe on the website, can be found, as well as information from those who are not affiliated with the company. One of the first ways informed purchases can benefit the community and on a personal level are higher quality purchases. Like I said, there's an overwhelming amount of products and variety on the market, but becoming educated about what is being purchased reduces the risk of buyer's remorse. Dr. Lyraz Margalit points out in a blog about consumer behavior that consumers exposed to additional details and information about a product are less likely to purchase it compared to those who are exposed only to the product image and brief details. Research is the most important tool for quality purchases because the customer can find what is really right for themselves. Impulse purchases made because of an advertisement are often risky and not gainful. Saving money is another way the knowledgeable customer benefits. Research can often reveal facts that will turn the customer away entirely or push them to find a better alternative. During the time taken to find more information about the product, often the need or want can even fade away, and ultimately the customer will benefit and save money by doing research. Ethical purchasing is the last way that the community can benefit from making informed decisions. The chances that an ethical purchase is made is greatly increased when there is more information for the consumer. Many buyers make purchases without knowledge about the company's practices or what they do. Nestle is an example of a very successful company with a very large customer base, but questionable practices. Allegations regarding their supply chain involving child labor and slave labor have been brought up within their cocoa production. Through public relations, though, Nestle has tried to convince customers that they have taken steps to avoid these issues and ethical dilemmas in their supply chain. Although in a paper by Madeline Wood at Brown University, Nestle's credibility was investigated. They determined that Nestle was not credible in these efforts and that they were insufficiently transparent with the steps they had taken to avoid these issues. Ultimately, research allows customers to buy products from companies whose practices align with their values and ethics. Whether it is groceries or a new vehicle, customers can make better decisions with the more information they have. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tuan.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm going to talk about how businesses can benefit communities. So businesses can benefit communities through credible business practices. Businesses can prove their credibility by producing high-quality product with high ethical standards. This improves their profits and their reputation. Transparency with consumers signals trust to citizens who are skeptical after being informed with manipulative advertising. This promotes growth and creates a sustainable business model. Businesses' credibility can also create brand loyalty by earning consumer trust. Ethical standards can also boost growth among conscious consumers. Patagonia is an example of a company that practices ethical standards. They produce all of their products in high-quality factories that does not have negative effects on the surrounding communities or their employees. They also pay their employees well and provide them with benefits. Many consumers fail to ask questions about a business and their practices, and businesses take advantage of this by falsely advertising their products, and this can create consequences for the consumers. Now I'm going to pass it over to Austin to conclude about the cost of advertising and its effects on society.
Thank you, Tuan. Advertising has become a crucial part of any successful business plan today. Companies stand to gain a tremendous amount by advertising for their products. Throughout history, we have seen the impact that advertising has had on consumers and their spending habits. Any form of advertising is a very vital tool to the corporations, and this is why they continue to dump billions of dollars into it. The U.S. government tries to protect its citizens, but can only do so much, and that is why it falls on the consumer to educate themselves in order to be able to see when they're being misled through advertisements. One thing about the capitalist society we live in is that you vote with your dollar, and what I mean by this is when you purchase a product, you're endorsing that company as a whole and saying that you agree with the activities and morals of that company. So this is why consumers must form their own opinions, so they can't let advertising control their voting power, because if companies vote for the consumers, the products will not improve their lives, but instead could be a total waste of money. If consumers questioned advertising, it could lead to well-rounded companies that are morally, economically, and environmentally sustainable. Nothing that has been previously mentioned in this presentation is a secret to society. It just takes some time to gather the pieces and organize them to make sense. Since to most, time is a limited resource, this report can be utilized to show consumers what to look for in order to make ethical and responsible purchasing decisions. Thank you for your time, and we hope that you can use this information in your day-to-day lives.